You know, everybody always talks about lenses that you can get, lens reviews, and they always review these really expensive lens options. But what about for those people who are just getting into photography or may not have a ton of budget for spending a ton on photography gear like lenses? Well, today I'm going to be talking about the 16 to 50 f3.5 to 5.6 Sony mirrorless E-mount lens and giving you a full review on it coming up. Hey, what's up guys, David Johnston here and welcome into the video. On this channel we talk landscape photography, so if you're into landscape photography at all, consider subscribing to this channel. Now in this video we're looking at the Sony 16 to 50 f3.5 to 5.6 lens, and this is an E-mount lens for mirrorless cameras. It's going to be for those crop sensor cameras like the a6000, a6300, a6500, and this is a good lens. It's one of those entry-level lenses that you can get, like a kit lens, a starter lens, what have you, whatever term you want to put to this lens. But I really want to talk about how it performs with landscapes. But I wanted to really talk about this lens. It's a video I've been wanting to do for a long time, just because I've been using this lens for like 3.5 to 4 years off and on my camera, and it actually performs really well for landscapes. So I wanted to give you guys an idea of how it actually performs, some of the things I like, some of the things I don't necessarily like that it does, and just give you a little feedback on it. Now, I got this lens as a kit set for the a6000 when I first invested in some mirrorless cameras. And when I first got it, I wanted a cheaper lens to come into the mirrorless system with, because when you switch over, I was using Canon, so I didn't want to spend like all my money right away on new lenses. So I went for a cheaper option of a lens, and it was this one, which gave me enough range with the 16 to 50 millimeter range that it has as a zoom lens. And to give you an idea on this, it's going to look more like a 24 to 70 zoom lens that you can have on a crop sensor camera. So this is a really good lens. Not only do I use it off and on for landscapes, it's a good wide angle options. I've shot a lot of wide angle shots with this lens in particular, and like with the 24 millimeter look that it actually ends up looking like with the 16 millimeter version on a crop sensor, what happens is you get some good leading lines or big foreground shots that you can make in the field. But you can also use this as a 50 millimeter lens, which shows up as more like a 70 millimeter on the crop sensor cameras, and this gives you a really good viewpoint of closer shots, really zoomed in shots. I tested this a lot in Grand Teton National Park, getting out into the park and photographing the mountains that were there. And this lens created some really good images when you're shooting at something like f11, f14 to f16, and I'll get more into that in just a second, some of the range in this of the aperture and the clarity of it. But if you're shooting anything from f11 to f16, this is a really sharp, clear lens. Specifically with the f16, you can shoot some really high quality sun stars with this lens. I was really shocked by that, because sometimes the more expensive lenses have more aperture rings or have more clarity in them to give you those sharp sun stars, but this one actually produces some really good sun stars when you get the sun on the horizon lines or popping out from behind a hard edge within your landscapes. That's one of the big benefits that I like of this lens. Number two, it's like really tiny. I mean, it's almost like one of those little pancake lenses that you can get. And it's so small and light that you can easily just toss it into your bag. Even if you don't think you're gonna use it, just put it in your pocket or something. It's so small and so light. It's probably lighter than my iPhone that I carry around with me, or about the same weight, but it's so small you can basically take it anywhere. Even if you're gonna leave it in the bag or leave it in your pocket, you might just wanna have it with you just in case. Now, I like to recommend some cheaper lenses when people are just getting started with photography, especially landscapes, because the gear can get so expensive. I would much rather you and recommend to you to start off with some lower end lenses like these. Even though they perform really well, I would recommend starting off on the low end of your budget with these and investing in educational resources, knowing how to master composition and get really good at landscape photography, and really study the lens market. So when you do buy a lens, you don't regret one of the lenses that you buy like I have in the past. You can get started with your educational material with my free ebook that's linked in the comment section. I'll pin that to the top so you guys can find it. Sign up to my email list so you can get that free ebook, 126 pages of pure landscape photography goodness and how you can get better at shooting and composing different shots with any type of gear that you can get for landscapes. Some of the drawbacks to this lens are really interesting. So one of the things that I do not like about this lens is that it has just this single ring, and this is your focus ring. And it's really not that great of a focus ring. I mean, using this in the field over and over, like I do not like using that focus ring. It does have this little zoom notch or whatever you want to call this type of equipment right here or technology. But I also don't like this. I prefer lenses that have the dual rings, like the Sony 70-200 f4 telephoto lens that I have, that has your zoom ring and then your focal ring up top. I like knowing which one I'm grabbing for. I like the ring system and not necessarily the little gear gizmo that's on the side of this one that you can toggle back and forth. But sometimes another big drawback of this lens is sometimes, like if you wanted to use this for macro or something like that, which I guess you could in a real pinch and then crop this in post-processing, is it gets a little soft on the focus anytime you're at like f8 or wider, especially for landscape shots. A lot of times that sharpness and crispness of the focus is kind of blurred out a little bit. I discovered this biggest negative impact of this lens in the field when I was shooting Oxbow Bend in Grand Teton National Park, and I noticed when I got the photo on post-processing that the mountains were a little soft in their focus, and it was because I was shooting at f8 on this, and maybe the automatic focus just didn't get dialed in exactly right, but it was just a little bit soft. And I've noticed that if I shoot f11 to f16, it's much more sharper, much more crisp. But getting into that f8 and wider range, you know, you're losing a little bit of that crisp focus. So always keep that in mind when you're using something like this for landscapes. I usually shoot landscapes at like f16 anyways. That was just a really dark morning, so I was trying to widen my aperture and get more light in, but it did allow me to discover one of the drawbacks of this lens. Now, that doesn't really deter me from recommending this lens, just because I find that the price point on it is cheap enough, it's small enough, and it's light enough that you can use this in a pinch if you're needing to. If you need a backup camera and you're looking for a lens for a backup camera, this one might be a good one to use whenever you're out in the field shooting landscapes in case one camera dies. If you want a different lens, maybe you don't want this one, but you want a variation of it, you can get some prime lenses that are a little bit cheaper, especially the Sony 50mm f1.8 is a really good lens to have in your bag as well, even for landscapes if you want to get into that. And then investing in a prime lens like the one I reviewed on the card showing up on your screen right now, the 12mm ultra wide angle lens from Rokinon. All right, guys, that's what I think of this lens. Solid lens to have in your bag, but it's up to you to make the choice. If this is gonna fit with your landscape photography, I have it linked in the video description for you guys to check out as well. Thanks so much for watching, guys. Keep shooting, and remember to check out the email list link that's in the comment section and pinned to the top.